There is no more difficult exopolitical issue than the emerging evidence for direct contact between humans and extraterrestrials. Put yourself in the position of a member of the government. Pick an agency, any agency, I don't care. And within that context of the fundamental bureaucratic processes, try to imagine how would you handle this. In commerce, right, at state, human resources, you name it. How do you handle this when it finally arrives at your doorstep? And they will. They have no choice. Reports by the tens of thousands of self-described contactees or experiencers, as they're often called, or abductees, as some call themselves, have been piling up in the filing cabinets of researchers around the world. Many hundreds of these reports have been thoroughly investigated and reported by researchers and therapists.
One component of the emerging evidence relates to reported implants. Many of these embedded artifacts have been removed and examined, and no researcher has done more of this work than our next speaker, a practicing podiatric surgeon in Southern California.
He is the author of The Alien and the Scalpel, Aliens and the Scalpel, and a leader in physical evidence research related to the extraterrestrial question.
There has been a major breakthrough in his work that will be revealed here today. You're in for a treat. This will be the first time he reveals this work and this breakthrough, and he also will be presenting that evidence to the media at the National Press Club Monday morning.
And if I may, Cheryl, as I indicated earlier, CNN called me directly, and when they call you, that's good, all right? They will be at the press conference on Monday. And I just received a call from Fox News. They will be at the press conference on Monday. All right. Sure.
Please welcome Dr. Roger Leir to X Conference 2009.
Hello? Okay. Well, as unaccustomed as I am to public speaking, I hope you enjoy what I have to say. And of course, heeded my request not to imbibe with some food before the presentation. And you probably know why. Anyway, are you all enjoying the conference so far? And I would like to personally thank Stephen Bassett and the Paradigm Research Group for giving me this opportunity to present this information to the first audience that is going to hear the new stuff that I have to say today. I always like to know who I'm speaking to. Many of you I know, or you know me from other conferences, and as I go to these events, I meet people that I haven't seen in many, many years. So I really, personally, from me to you, I consider you all family. And you're a family of exceptionally intelligent human beings. Otherwise, you wouldn't be participating in an event of this magnitude. And you will certainly come away with some great knowledge that the other speakers have presented, and I hope myself included will give you something that you can really take back to your friends, neighbors, and the young people. Next year, when the X Conference convenes again in 2012, bring one friend, just one. You can bring two. But if you bring one friend, you'll see this conference grow and grow and grow. And I like to tell my audiences that, and every year the conferences get bigger. Now, how many, I always like to know who I'm talking about. So how many of you have seen a UFO? Wow, it's about a whole room full, I think. How many of you think, and don't be shy, we're all friends, how many think you've been involved with the alien abduction program? Okay, that's quite a few. How many of you think you've been abducted and never returned? One guy just raised his hand over here. Where do you think you are, sir? Philadelphia? You must be part of the Philadelphia experiment then. Anyway, let's get on with the business. I have brought a few things upon request. One is my latest book, which is the second edition of The Aliens and the Scalpel. This is not the first edition. This has newer material in it. I didn't bring many, and there's only 2 left, and I'm holding one. So if you want one, good luck. They are available through the website, which is alienscalpel.com, which we're trying to modernize and redo almost every day now, because the new information that we get is so voluminous. We've now created a section on the website that is for the research scientist. Really, don't waste your time unless you have an academic background on going on that section of the site, because it's very technical. Much of it is beyond my knowledge also. But for those that are science-oriented and understand this stuff, be my guest. One of the other things I brought amongst a few DVDs, this is not a DVD, this is a book on tape, and it's 510 minutes of me narrating the first book, complete with sound effects. So if you're up to 510 minutes of absolute torture listening to me, I suggest that you get one of these, but again, only a few. One more announcement I have to make, and then we'll really get into it. How many of you feel that there is a necessity for a magazine publication written in English to begin with, which will become a national and international magazine containing information that has been researched with good photographs and graphics and representations from UFO researchers all over the world? How many would like to see this kind of a magazine? Great. I am working with my friend in Brazil, A.J. Javard, who has been publishing a UFO magazine there for 26 years. And he and I have kind of teamed up, and we've really put something together. And the only thing that's stopping us at the moment is an investor. We need about $150,000, which isn't that much in today's market, to put 3 months on the market. We have commitments from all over the world that will contribute articles to the magazine that have been researched. We've got science researchers, we've got UFO researchers, we've got writers. There'll be a section in which you can ask questions of the editor, and you will receive answers in the next issue. The magazine will be driven by a website. That website will be linked to other well-known websites which we will have a contractual relationship with. So if you would like to see this go forward and you have any contacts, please see me afterwards, and I am deadly sincere about getting this information out to the rest of the world in this format. And with that, we'll get into it. So how do we get the first slide up? Do I do something here, or you do that back there? Yeah. Aha. Okay, I can change him from here now? Okay. All right, well, you know where you are, and I know where I am, so that takes care of the first slide. Okay. This is the 15th case that we've done for the surgical removal of an object from individuals who allege alien abduction. And we're going to call him John Smith for a pseudonym. I can tell you this, that he is a physical scientist, and he's the first one that has been in this category of the 15 cases that we've done. He's 47 years old, and he's married with 3 children. He doesn't live far from my practice in Southern California. He has a positive abduction history and with a lot of memories. And when we took him on as a patient, he came in with the complaint of pain in a toe. And it was the second toe. We took x-rays and we found that there was a metallic object in the toe. He came in not as an individual who was looking for an implant, but he came in as a pure podiatric case. But he knew sort of what my other hobby was. And so it was kind of a coincidence, or maybe it was something else involved there. Maybe he might have been told by somebody to come in. But we saw that, and then we did a regular workup for removal of the object, and then slowly he began to tell me in a very reticent way that he was involved in the alien abduction phenomena. Now, many folks that come to me know what I do. So I run literally hundreds of emails and telephone calls behind. This was not the case. Here was just the opposite. Patient comes in as a regular podiatric surgical patient and winds up as an abductee. Let's try that one. Okay, as I told you, we took an x-ray and we verified that there was an object in the second toe. All these objects that appear on x-ray are looked at by our radiologists. They don't leave it up to me to decide what's there, so we have radiological consult as one of the first things, and then they give you a breakdown of where it is, whether it's metallic or non-metallic, and the approximate size. In this case, it was 3 to 5 millimeters. And it was radio dense, which means that you can see it easily in an x-ray. It's about as big around as a pencil lead. And let me add at this point that we have 7 of these. And if you lined them all up on a piece of paper or a surgical sponge or a drape, they would all look exactly alike. You wouldn't be able to tell one from the other. Now, this was on the bottom of the second toe of the left foot. And I said, well, how long, John, have you had this in here? And he pops up and he says, since February the 28th of 2008. Well, I don't usually hear this from people. Usually they'll scratch their head and say, well, I don't know. But the first time I felt a pain here was, I think, about 3 years ago. So here's a fellow who comes in and gives me the precise date. And so I said, well, how do you know it's this date? He says, because that's when I had an abduction. And then he goes ahead and describes the abduction. It's one of the clinical classical cases which you find in any of Bud Hopkins' books or any of the other abduction researchers, David Jacobs, etc. Well, as you know, I like the stories of abduction. I think they're all very interesting, but I don't do hypnosis. I don't go seeking as to whether their stories are a reality, a fiction. I don't try and help increase their memory. I work strictly with the physical evidence. And but his story was pretty classical. Now, when we look at these things, we look naturally from the outside in. Was there a scar? Absolutely no scar. But he did tell me that the morning after this event occurred, he found 2 small drops of blood on the bedsheet. And also, I want to just add a little side note here. In case you see me or somebody else on on one of the famous television programs, whether it be Larry King or UFO Hunters or the other hundreds I've done. And there's a debunker in the house, a skeptic. Is there any debunkers and skeptics here? Do we have any professionals? No, okay. That's good, because you're not getting paid for the attendance here. Anyway, they'll all say, oh, well, yeah, we know that abductions just due to hypnagogic sleep, and they'll go on to explain to you how in this mystic state where you're half awake and half asleep, the body is paralyzed and you can't move and you got these weird dreams, and therefore it's nothing. You weren't abducted, you were just paralyzed. Well, if I was just paralyzed, I'd be pretty upset about that too. But anyway, I just want you to know that 67% of abductions occur during the waking hours of day. So the next time you see one of these famous debunkers, email them or something and say, hey, you better go back and get your statistics redone over again. And by the way, how much did you get paid for being on this program? Because the other guy didn't. We look at if there's any radio frequency, or first of all, electromagnetic fields. We use a Gauss meter. And in this case, we got a reading of 10 milligauss, which is a pretty good electromagnetic bump. We use a Geiger counter, and we look for radiation. There was no radiation present. But we also use a radio frequency detector, and we did get a radio frequency. They're listed here, 14.7, etc., megahertz, and 17.68, so on, gigahertz. And we record these. I have not sent these to anyone yet, as we did with some of the other cases, to know what range this is. Or one we found out was a deep space communication frequency. And that begs the question of why is an object in somebody's body broadcasting on a deep space communication frequency if these objects are supposed to be extraterrestrial in nature. So I can theorize, like we all can. That means guessing. It's okay if you guess, I guess. Okay, it's okay if you guess, I guess. I don't have a band. You got to give me some help here. What's the explanation for this? And it seems to me that the only logical explanation, if the object in itself is a non-terrestrial device, that maybe somebody is sharing this information with somebody else. So maybe these things operate on scalar waves, which is a far more advanced technology than radio waves. That's why SETI is out there looking for radio waves. Radio waves. What advanced civilization do you know that uses radio waves? So I agree 100% with my colleague Stan Friedman when he calls SETI silly effort to investigate. Now we went through all the pre-op stuff, examination, and the rest of the things that we do for any patient. So if you came in and you wanted your hammer toe corrected, we do the same things, examination and history and all that stuff. And then we set the patient up for a surgery, and when we do one of these surgeries, it's very well documented. It's witnessed, it's televised, it's recorded in half a dozen different ways with still photos and video and so on. We have multiple witnesses. Everybody signs forms, and we make sure that when they put their signature on there, we have a check underneath that's blank. We have a check underneath that's blank. Boy, I'm really laying eggs here. We got to keep this going, because this is pretty dry material. I have to wet your whistle. Anyway, we use a device during the procedure which is called a C-arm. It's an active X-ray device, low radiation dosage to the participants, including the surgeons and the patient. And the picture comes out on 2 television screens. and we were actually able to put an instrument into the body, and you can visualize what you're seeing. It makes it a lot easier to remove these things. I was not the surgeon on this case. Our surgeon was a general surgeon who doesn't mind his name being used. His name is Dr. John Matriciano, and if he was able, he was going to be here for the press conference on Monday, but unfortunately he had another conference, I believe it was in Paris, so he wasn't going to be able to be here. Now, the anesthesia, you know, we're not barbaric, so we just don't go in and do these little things. What we do is we give them a little shot of a local anesthesia, puts the area to sleep. Now, what's different about this case than some of the other ones with like objects was that when we went to remove this, it began to come apart. So we had to take it out a piece at a time. I haven't seen this before. This is the first time. And so we took these little pieces out, and I'll be showing you a tiny little bit of video here. If anything bothers you, remember, just look away. She'll all be gone. It has a little bit of blood. And we take these little pieces and we put them on a sterile drape. Now, a sterile drape, for those of you that are involved in the medical profession, is usually coated with a coat of plastic. So rather than put these small objects on a gauze sponge, where later you're going to have to, you know, use your eyeball and skills and hours to, you know, dig them out and separate the fibers, we put them on this plastic drape, and then from there they went directly into the holder, which has the patient's own blood serum on it. And so far, we've been very lucky. We haven't lost a specimen yet. So blood is drawn from the patient before the procedure is done. We put it into a centrifuge. We spin it down. That separates the solid from the liquid portion of the blood, and then that serum is used to preserve the object. Now, here is some of the devices that we use. I'll get my trusty laser out and we'll bring down a plane. Excuse me. Here we go. This is a radio frequency detector. You see it has an antenna and so on. And before we use one of these, we sweep the room with it, and we look for any radio frequency bands that are detectable. And this has several different devices. You can convert it from megahertz to gigahertz frequencies, and you can slow it down so it's going different gate speeds, so to speak, and you can record what you're getting. The device here, anybody know what that is? It's a very complex device, folks. Guys, what is it? What? Toenail clipper. No. Toenail clipper going once. Toenail clipper going to. No. No, it's a stud finder. Yeah, so if you're looking at a wall and you want to find a stud, ladies, you get this. Home Depot has these little devices. So stud finders can be used in this case because we're dealing with metallic objects, and if you got a metallic object, it'll pick it up. And this one did, and it zeroed right in on it. Now, we have certain guests that are there for the surgery. Anybody know who he is? Whitley Strieber. Yes, Whitley was there. And I don't have to go into that other photo. All know that dude. There's a picture of me doing something with my hands. I don't know exactly what I'm doing. But the television screens that you see here, this is part of the C-arm device. And I'm pointing to the object that's in the toe. Unfortunately, we tried to get a good representation as to what this looks like on the X-ray, but we weren't able to do so. So you have to look very close. This is a blow up here, and you can look. If you look very close, you'll see an object which is a little bit less radio dense than the bone. So I have to apologize for that. We do have some really good photos of this, but we just, for whatever the reason, the scanner wouldn't scan it in there. Okay, here's the surgery going on. As I said, you see a little bit of blood, nothing fantastic. This instrument that you see here is putting the little objects on this drape sheet that I was talking to you about. And then those objects are very carefully taken off and they're put into this vial of serum. Okay. Everything at that point was relatively normal. This is what we've done many, many times now. Never had a problem. The vial, specimen container, is then sealed, dated, and signed. Then it's refrigerated. And I usually am the keeper of the refrigerated object, unless it's going immediately to a lab. Well, it wasn't going to go to a lab for several days. After about 48 hours, for whatever the reason, and a lot of things I do don't apparently have a reason, but I just do them anyway. It's like somebody were talking to me. I said, you know, I'm going to take a look at this thing and see what's going on. So I took it out of the refrigerator and I looked at it and I turned the bottle so that I was looking through the bottom of it like you see here. And all those pieces, those little tiny pieces that I had taken out, which were pretty light in color, all changed color. They became very dark, almost black. And I'm glad you're sitting, because when I tell you the next part, you're going to either think I'm crazy or you've just heard the wildest story in the world. But it's true. It's so true that we hired a cameraman to come down and film it. They started to aggregate in the shape of the original object. We never saw anything like that before. I have no explanation. Now, this was such a great case, and because the geography was so close to where we work, we were able to go to his house and do an examination of his house and property. It was a single-story dwelling, and as you find usually in Southern California, the house is made with an exterior which is plaster over chicken wire wrapping and so on, and the interior of the home is plasterboard, and it's covered with stucco coating. Since the weather in Southern California is not severe, there's not too many brick homes or that kind of construction. So we were looking at all that, and we found, first of all, a series of magnetic anomalies. The exterior wall of the master bedroom, the wall itself had a window. The window was close to the bed, and above and below the window, we took readings on the wall of anywhere from 6 to 8 milligauss of an electromagnetic field. He had an avocado tree growing in the backyard, and so we said, well, let's check the avocado tree. Now, one of the things this fellow relates is seeing 3 feet tall raccoons in his backyard with big eyes. Has anybody here seen a 3 foot tall raccoon? I haven't. So we checked this avocado tree and we laid the Gauss meter on a branch, and it just went crazy, pushing the meter up to 10 milligauss. I have never seen a tree with a 10 milligauss electromagnetic reading, and I wouldn't want to eat one of the avocados. The backyard soil, not only surrounding this tree, but in other areas, undergoes spontaneous combustion. That means it catches fire by itself. Well, usually when you see something like that, you think, well, there's probably a gas leak here somewhere, so don't smoke. So we called the gas company, and they came out with their leak detector and told us that there was no gas leak anywhere. So we decided to do an analysis of the soil, and we used the scanning electron microscope and did what we call an EDX, which gives us the constituents of the soil, and that particular soil was extremely high in bromine. Now we said, okay, well, we need a comparison. So we went to the soil of the house next door, and on either side, and we sampled their soil, and we looked at the data from those two, no bromine. He had a boat that was parked in the front yard, and it had a fiberglass hull. The hull of the boat was magnetized, fiberglass magnetized. You tell me how you do that. He also has a Cadillac that he drives every day, and there wasn't any place on the car that wasn't magnetized. And we went out and checked other cars that were parked out in the street, and they didn't have these anomalies at all. Now, before I go to the interior of the home, I want to mention the fact that we had to establish standards. You know, what were the standards? What could you compare it to? What about the exterior wall and so on? So everything that I'm telling you, we had a control that we used so that we could, you know, if we got 10 milligauss or 6 milligauss or 5 milligauss, we would do a comparable wall or a comparable control on a neighbor's house. So we know that whatever is going on in this house is specific to this house. And this house, of course, is where this individual alleges alien abduction goes on. And this is repeated. And I also should mention that before the surgery, he had no contact with any kind of a hypnotherapist or a regressionist. And we give the individuals the opportunity afterward so that if they want to do that, we put them together with a qualified person who can do this. And in my area, we use a young lady by the name of Yvonne Smith, who had worked with Bud Hopkins, and she's the best we have for the West Coast. Now, in the interior of the home, all the utensils in the kitchen drawers, including wooden and plastic serving spoons, salad spoons, were magnetic. So how do you get wooden spoons that are magnetic? That's, I think, kind of hard to do. There was a paint can, which was in a cardboard can. Cardboard, no metal on it. It was magnetic. We looked at some of the hinges on the kitchen cupboards, and we just simply used a compass, and we would go towards the hinge with the compass, and the needle would be attracted to one part of the hinge. And then we would go up and down the hinge, and the needle would just stay there. So in looking for a pole, we said, you know, this is something strange. So we actually took one of the hinges off the cupboard, and we tried to find the opposite pole so that the compass would spin in an opposite direction, and we couldn't find one. And yet there's supposed to be no such thing as a monopole. I have seen this before with another abductee's house also in California. The non-metallic portion of the counters, which were synthetic, mainly plastic, they were also magnetized. You could take a nail with iron on it, and you drop it, and it would fall on the counter, and it would stick. We went into the master bedroom where a lot of these events take place, and we went over the wall that we had looked at from the outside master bedroom wall with the same instrumentation, and we found that below the window was an area which was similar to the one on the outside that was highly magnetic with a high reading. This is a drawing of the house. I don't know how clear it is. It's a little blurry, but it gives you a general idea of the way the house plan is laid out. This is the yard. This is a picture of the tree. That's the avocado tree with a 10 milligauss electromagnetic field. This is the soil, which catches fire, high content in bromine. Now, we shut off the lights, and we used a light bar with 3 different frequencies of ultraviolet light. And lo and behold, at the same spot where we found this high magnetic reading on the inside of the bedroom wall, we found 2 4-fingered small handprints. That's a picture of it. Here's another one. And it's a little harder to see here because it's a scanned reproduction. But you saw a slide up here before with open minds. Do you all know what open minds is? How many don't know what open minds is? Well, you do or you don't? Okay, well, Open Minds is a company that's been started by a friend of ours who has been very kind to the UFO field. His name is John Rayo. He's in the bio-laboratory technology business in Arizona, and he's trying to do something to help us out. He has a certain sum of money, and he's investing it in conferences and other aspects of the field of ufology. And he, since he's on the forefront of some biotechnology, he found out that there was a tape that has been recently developed. And you can take this tape, it's like a piece of adhesive tape, and you can lay it down over a substance and then push it down, and then when you carefully peel it off, guess what it peels off? Your DNA. It's a forensic tape, but it's now out for use also for a lot of other things. So he got some of this tape, and John, one weekend when his wife left town, cut out this section of wall, and she's involved in the phenomena too. But if you know anything about abductees, when it comes to marriage, it can be quite a problem between husband and wife. She's probably more involved than he is, but she doesn't want to talk about it. She doesn't want to acknowledge it, and the kids are also involved. So he had to make up a little white lie. He just told her there was a leak, and he had to fix the wall. So she went away for the weekend. We took the piece of wall, and we sent that down to John Rayo, and the DNA process is ongoing now. So this information will be coming out as soon as we get it. Now, I already covered this about what happened to the object in the container within a 48-hour period. We don't have an explanation for it. It's just as magnetic today as it was before it was removed. Now, I get asked a lot, gee, do these things stay magnetic, and how long do they stay that way? Just from experience in dealing with these objects, we find that there is a decay which begins to occur usually about 2 weeks, and then the longest period of time has been about 6 weeks until we get total magnetic decay. That means it's not there anymore. Okay, this is a video. How do I get this to play? No. Can you do that from there? Yeah. It's right here at this black slide.
The PDF file in there. Is there a video on here too?
Yeah, it's right here. Usually it comes up, you just click on it.
Yeah, but it's probably a file
Oh,
on
wait
here
a
that
minute.
didn't get moved.
Wait a minute. Click on that.
No, it's probably a file on here that didn't
Oh,
get moved.
okay. Can you put it on over there?
Yeah, give me a second.
Sure. We're going to put this video on. We'll just go on while I'm doing this, and as soon as he's got it cooking here, why, we'll go to that one. Okay, now we've covered the biological aspect. You're going to see the surgery as soon as he gets it going here. We're getting into an area now of metallurgical detail. I've had to learn some metallurgy in order to understand what's going on. I'm not a metallurgist. I am not a scientist. I am basically a messenger. So if you don't like the message, then don't kill the messenger. We've had an addition of 3 scientists who have come aboard to our science team. They're now on the board of ANS Research. One is going to be at the press conference on Monday morning. Now, to get a scientist to come out and publicly talk about this stuff is a rarity, because I found in doing this work, whether you're dealing with academic science or some of the other academic fields, we find that scientists pray to higher masters. They're also on somebody's payroll. They're there to feed their families, and scientists, it's a joke because they don't make much money and they contribute a lot to the world. But if you expect honesty out of academic science and they are working for some institution or pharmaceutical company or research house, you're not going to get it. So when Dr. Alex Mosier appears here on Monday, if you're at the press conference, put up your hands and really clap, because he's a brave, brave guy. There's the surgery. Here we go. Stan Friedman still likes slides. That instrument now, you see, is moving the toe. That's because it's clamped onto a piece of the object. Everybody okay so far? So we put it on this drape. And then it's now transferred into the transport container in which it's sealed. Now, can I go on to the next? All right. Okay. So we're just getting into the metallurgical stuff. So Dr. Alex Mosier will be here on Monday at the press conference, and he will explain all this stuff in detail, but I'm going to go over it to the best of my ability for you folks, because you're the first ones that are going to hear this. SEMs are scanning electron microscopy. EDX is elemental X-ray detection. It shows you the elements that are in the object. I probably don't have that initials right. And so we can find out what the thing's made of, in other words, to put it that way. If it's got iron in it, if it's magnetic, it should have some iron. It should have some iron in it, unless it's something really weird. ICP-MS is ion. No, it isn't either. I'm not doing too good. But anyway, it's a test for looking for isotopic ratios. The MS is mass spectrometry. And then we do optical microscopy, where we're essentially looking through high-powered microscopes and looking at the object. And Raman spectroscopy is, again, a test which allows you to look at the spectrum of elements in an object. So I'm not too good with all the initials, but sometimes I remember what they mean. So here's what we got, folks. As long as you're sitting here and waiting for this, we find that the iron is meteoric iron. Now, in 1995 and 96 and 97, when we had the first set of objects that were sent out by the National Institute for Discovery Science, vis-a-vis Bob Bigelow, they came back as being part of meteorite samples. Now, we know at that time the patient didn't whack a meteorite with the back of his hand, and the other patient didn't step on one. So it seems to be now, we've had several now, that we find these objects contain meteoric iron. And we can tell that because of what's called the nickel-iron ratio. So if you look at meteorites on a table, you can see how much nickel there is to the iron, and it puts it in a category that we'll call the iron meteoric. Now, why is it meteoric? I was talking to somebody at the conference here today, and he gave me a good education and theory as to why meteoric iron is being used by some entity from elsewhere to make an object perform a specific task. Now we look at the minor elements that are found on the sample. They are, first of all, rare on Earth. These are not normal elements that you find laying around. And certainly they're not just rare on Earth, but they're impossible to find in the human body unless somebody put it in them, or unless you were standing somewhere below an atomic bomb and you got your nice dose of uranium. So I'll go through these. Ruthenium. Now, iridium is only found in very small concentrations in the Earth's crust. We know that there is iridium that has been found in non-terrestrial objects such as moon rocks and so on, but it's not found here. Palladium, rhodium is not found in any quantity anywhere. Osmium, hafnium, yttrium, rhenium, all these elements you don't find. So just looking at the elemental composition themselves, it's pretty easy to say what conclusion can you come to. What conclusion can you come to by looking at these elements? Are they from here? No. So this is the first time we have total conclusive evidence just by looking at the elements that we're dealing with an object which is non-terrestrial. In addition to this, as you know, we like uranium because we like to get the energy out of it, and we like to make bombs out of it so we can run around destroying ourselves and the planet very nicely. Now, uranium itself has various isotopes. Do you all know what isotopes are? Is there anybody that doesn't? Okay. So you know that U-238 does not exist by itself. If you take a piece of uranium, you know that it exists with U-235 and so on. There's a ratio of these isotopes to each other. This sample has only U-238. Now, as to what each one of these elements does, as a matter of fact, I don't know, but they're there. And so it's non-terrestrial. And, you know, just from this, not seeing the rest of it yet, you haven't seen it yet, just from this you can draw the conclusion that this is not a terrestrial object. Now, some of these elements show non-terrestrial isotopic ratios. We know that for sure. We see that the iron appears to be meteoric in origin, and there are numerous inclusions when you look at the sample under high magnification through the electron microscope, and we're looking at magnifications up to 250, 405, 600,000 times. We see that, for example, the biological tissue that I've said before seems to be growing around the metal is growing from the metal because it's coming out of the metal. You know, and as far as I know, unless somebody tells me I'm wrong and there's something that's been newly discovered, we don't know how to make biological tissue grow out of metal. I told you, you're going to hear some weird stuff here. We find that there are crystals, and everybody knows what crystals look like, but these are rectangular crystals of various size. And they are nanocrystals in size. That means they are nanometers, but they're in various size. They're rectangular, and they're made from sodium and chlorine. They're sodium chloride crystals, and we call them orthorhombic crystals because they are regular and they are in various sizes. Now, I don't think anybody here is probably old enough to remember what a crystal radio is, are you? Well, that's where radio started, with a crystal and a battery and a coil and an earphone, and lo and behold, you got a radio station. And we've gone a long way since then, but we do know that crystals vibrate in varying frequencies, and so what we're faced here is with something that looks like a nanotechnological device which can transmit or even perhaps receive. Now, the next one is really a biggie. About 5 to 7 years ago, there was talk of something called carbon nanotube. And science, academic science, was arguing back and forth whether these things can exist in nature or whether they can be built. And if they could be built, what could we use them for? That was about 5 to 7 years ago. Today, there's talk of taking carbon nanotubes and building a space elevator because of their strength. And this is within the realm of our technology. And as you can well realize, if we could build a space elevator and we could take a capsule outside the Earth's atmosphere, let's say for about 5,000 miles, that launches of vehicles into space would be very, very inexpensive to do because we wouldn't have to defeat gravity in order to do this. So although this may sound like a big joke, space elevator, it's a very serious thing and people are talking about it. Carbon nanotubes can also be used, and there's some research which is going on in Japan that has to do with this, making them into structures which become fibers. And you'll see I have listed here carbon nanofibers. So these are carbon nanotubes which have been put together, and when you can take these fibers and use them for a practical use, one of the companies in Japan is talking about making clothing out of these fibers. And what do you think the clothing will look like? Anybody got any ideas? It'll basically look like anything you want it to look like, because it'll keep you warm in the winter. It'll keep you cool in the summer. And you ladies that like to change clothes all the time, you'll be able to flip a switch of some such device, and your dress will turn from beautiful blue to red, or it'll have straps that won't be there anymore, so watch out. So you can change your clothes, and you can use this, in the clothing industry. Carbon nanofibers. That's just one of many, many, many things, many possible uses that these can be used for. Carbon nanotubes, the technology we have now, we know how to make them. We know a lot more about them. They can be used in many, many different ways because carbon nanotubes can be doped. And that has nothing to do with the IQ of a carbon nanotube. Maybe the guy that's working with it is a dope. But when you dope carbon nanotubes, it simply means that you can mix other things with it. You can put it inside the tube. You can make educated nanostructural devices out of these. You could use them in medical purposes. And, if you watch some of the science fiction shows that are on television, the things that they do, you could take a carbon nanostructure, inject it into the human body, and it could eat up all the cholesterol and calcium that's in your arteries, blocking the arterial tree, so it can open up your circulation again. So carbon nanotubes have many, many, many different possible uses and applications. We're working with these now. But in these objects, we have, as I said, we have biological tissue, which grows out of the metal. We have sodium chloride orthorhombic crystals. We have carbon nanotubes and carbon nanofibers. Now, another thing that I've been told that carbon nanofibers can be used for is antennae. Now, these structures, these are in nanometers, which is very, 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 very small. When we look at the isotopic ratios, they have been compared to known isotopic ratios of elements in our solar system. And guess what? They're not from here. I'm glad you're all quiet because this is a biggie. If we find all these structures and we find all these subatomic structures and we find things like carbon nanotubes and crystals and all this stuff, and then when we look at it and we look at some of the isotopes and we say, my God, this is not even from our solar system, we're dealing with something that's more than extraterrestrial. And as I said, you're the first to hear this. Therefore, in conclusion, we can say that this material is not from this planet and it's not from our own solar system. So whatever intelligence, wherever they may come from, whether they be extraterrestrials that are planetary extraterrestrials from another solar system, through time, interdimensional, or however they get here, it is 100% conclusive to look at the fact that the human race all over the planet has been interacting with intelligences from elsewhere. And this has probably been going on, according to our history, for thousands of years. Now, what they're doing and what their programs are, we don't know. And is the public being informed about this? Hell no. Does, as Steve Bassett would put it, disclosure, is disclosure going to come out of Washington, D.C., from a congressman who is sitting in the Senate or a House of Representatives? He may not know any more than anybody else. But there are people involved in government who do know. There are people who are involved in world governments that do know. And this knowledge has got to come out. And some of it is coming out as we sit here at this conference. What we're waiting for is the official word from here, from the Capitol. You know, a lot of information is being released from the Nordic countries, from South America, Brazil, and so on, from Canada, UK, and just the list is getting on, goes on farther and farther and farther. But, you know, someday, and I fully expect to hear, not only that you're going to hear that we are being visited and have been, but also having some kind of a relationship with non-terrestrial entities. And what is it all for? You know, if it was bad, do you think they would be implanting individuals with these objects? I don't think so, because as far as I know, nobody has died yet from an implant. And if they're advanced intelligences, do they have to fool around if they want to destroy us or eat us or anything else? I don't think so. So it looks like perhaps there's a concern by those intelligences from elsewhere, and as Whitley Strieber calls them, the visitors. I think they're concerned about what we do here and what we do to each other. And maybe that ain't such a good thing, because it might have an effect on some entity or something somewhere else in the universe. We know if we explode an atomic device anywhere on this planet, whether it's underground or under the sea or in the air, a magnetic wave is released. And it goes off planet and keeps on going. And there isn't a physicist, a nuclear physicist, an astrobiologist, or an astronomer, or anybody else that's going to tell you what that magnetic wave is doing traveling through space. But maybe somebody else knows. And maybe it's not such a good thing. You know, and is everything organized that entities are coming here from somewhere else and interacting with the human population? Is it all some some effort to interact with human beings? Or do you think it's possible that somebody's coming here with absolutely no agenda at all? And how many are coming here? You know, and again, what the purpose is. Maybe Joe from planet Gluck, far out in the galaxy somewhere, says to his wife one day, hey, why don't we go down to Sam's Rent-A-Saucer lot and we'll take the kids, and I got a great idea because I hear there's this wonderful little blue planet way out in the arm of the Milky Way, and we'll throw the kids in there, we'll pack a lunch, We'll go down there, and my God, we'll have a great weekend, folks. You know, we'll have a great time. We'll cloak. Nobody will see us. And I hear they do wonderful things. They blow each other up. They kill they burn the planet. We'll stay on it. We'll stay there and watch. We'll have a really great time. So how do we know that somebody doesn't come here? The curious one, or somebody that's just passing by. And you're familiar with the Betty and Barney Hill story. We're not even on the trade routes, according to the map that Betty Hill got. You know, we're off the beaten path here. But I can tell you this, that somebody or some entity or more than one entity has an interest in us. And I think as a human being, we're very unique. We have about 40,000 miles of neural network in our bodies. We're a complex electrochemical individual, a bit robotic in nature if you look at the neurons firing. We have a circulatory system which feeds everything. We're able to take oxygen out of the atmosphere, bind it with a hemoglobin, iron pigment, carry it around in our bodies, and feed our cells with other food and nutrition that we take in through the alimentary system. Of course, we all don't do such a good job because we eat stuff we like. And not everything we like is good. And then on top of that, we have some major problems in the human condition. One is greed, and that's a very bad one. So if I have time, do I have time left? Is anybody keeping track? Because I wasn't. I'm going to tell you about some of the changes in the kids. Now, there's been a lot of talk about kids that are offspring of abductees or even those that don't admit to alien abduction. And what they were talking about, they're putting names. We're talking about millennium children, children of the millennium, star children. All kinds of different authors are writing books about kids. Well, listen to your kids, listen to your grandkids and see what they have to say. And you're going to be absolutely overwhelmed. And I've been in 42 countries in 7 years. I've talked to people with interpreters in various languages, but nobody has ever told me I was wrong. Listen to what the kids say. Listen to what they can do. You're going to say, if it's in America, oh, they must have heard that on TV. Well, they didn't hear it on TV. They have a way of knowing. And I did a study with the 17 functional growth characteristics in children. And when you look at these and you graph them out, they've been accelerated from 16 to 80% in a period of 40 years. Now, how is that possible? Well, we've gone through various scenarios, and if you're a devout theist, that's your answer. It's an act of God. And if you're not satisfied with that, then the only other possibility is that we are being genetically changed. Now, maybe things, external influences, do affect DNA, like the coming of a galactic wave from the center of our galaxy or some of the things that you've heard today. But also, it would seem that so many people are involved in the alien abduction program, and that's logically, if you study these cases, there's always seems to be the taking of ova and sperm. Well, they're not taking it to make breakfast. So what else can you do with ova and sperm? It's got to be something that's genetic. So maybe some of the traits that we have bred into us, such as the overwhelming greed, that seems to control this planet in a hierarchy, keeping us as stupid as we could get, is maybe allowing us to wake up if somebody comes and manipulates our DNA to the fact that we say no to all this stuff and get away from the greed. So I don't know, that's my idea. But listen to the kids and listen to what they have to say and look what they can do and look at their interrelationships between kids and animals and kids and plants and their artistic abilities. And you're going to find very absolute phenomenal things. And it ain't the TV. The rule is that if a child survives, no matter what the culture, anywhere on the planet, they're going to show these attributes. So check it out for yourselves, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Take it home. Tell other people that you were at the X conference where you heard some startling new information, and it's the truth. Thank you.